Coming up,
If you overtax, like was happened in Kenya, what happens is you grow an underground or black market where the punter gets more bang for his buck because of the lack of taxes. So definitely there's been a change in the player in the last few years from being a taker of what's being provided to having a meaningful impact on what product is requested and required from operators. If we get it right, I think Africa won't be just the next big market, will be the benchmark for other territories on how to be an inclusive, sustainable iGaming operation worldwide.
previously, if you have to discuss the player's life cycle from the first point of engagement to VIP handling and also locking in the players to continually engage the platform, how would you discuss that on exploring that kind of aspect?
So, if we speak about how we engage the player, new players as an example, player comes in, he registers, he might make a first or second deposit, but how are we treating that player differently to players who have been playing with us for months and even years?
Dear listeners, thank you for being part of the iGaming Africa podcast. This session is brought to you by SoftSwiss, a global tech expert with over 15 years of experience in providing innovative iGaming solutions and comprehensive software for online casinos, sports betting, and affiliate management. Remember to visit our website igamingafrica.com for the latest news and updates from the iGaming industry in Africa. Hi everyone, welcome back to the iGaming African podcast. With me today, I have Cameron Grain, an experienced global consultant in the iGaming industry. He's been around for, several decades, over 2 decades, and he's someone I've been super excited to talk to. So yeah, today we'll be getting to finally have the conversation. Hi Cameron, how are you doing today?
Hey Victoria, nice to speak to you. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's so much I've been looking forward to talk to you about, especially around compliance, finance, taxation, and several interesting topics in the iGaming industry. So, but before we really get to have this conversation, I would really want everyone to know more about you because I can't wait to hear more about your experience too. Please, can you share a bit about yourself with us?
Yeah. And like I said, my name is Cameron Green, and my journey started over 2 decades ago, long before iGaming was even in regular use across Africa. So, and I got the opportunity to work in retail, in digital, casino, sports books, you name it. And from the early days of scratch cards and SMS betting to right now where we are in AI driven segmentation, live dealer streaming, and everything in between. But most recently, I've been helping operators build sustainable and compliant and culturally relevant businesses across Africa. So, whether it's from Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, as well as South Africa.
That's really amazing. From what you've said, basically, iGaming in Africa has moved from several stages, from being on the sideline to center of a lot of things happening, also in the space in general. What would you say the space looked like, 10 years ago?
So iGaming definitely didn't explode overnight. It didn't become popular overnight, but it was a gradual and relentless shift from like small local agents taking payments and limited bets right through to what we have now. So full scale multi-product platforms with regional and continental ambitions. So the continent that's evolved not only in technology, but also how we access, how we trust, and how punters behave. So all of that about how they play, how they pay, all of that has changed significantly in the last 10 years.
But looking at the changes, would you say maybe mobile adoption, fintech solution, and several of these tech innovation, what would you say has been their impact? on the iGaming space? And would you say transforming players' access as also an engagement has changed a lot in the space in general?
Absolutely. So when we have a look back in the early 2000s, the setup was probably a shop, a satellite feed, some printed odds on a piece of paper, and somebody behind the cash desk taking the bets. If we have a look today, and if we have a look, especially recently with COVID, what that's done, it's fast forwarded everything where we are right now. So using APIs, different game types, mobile money, 24/7 CRM. So mobile has definitely been a game changer. So it's not that we moved in Africa from desktop to mobile; it completely missed it. So we've gone and we've done the same with payments. It's traditional banks and all that hasn't been impactful in a lot of Africa. It's services like M-pesa, Airtel Money, Tigo Pesa, where it happens. So everything else in your pocket on the mobile phone. So where it was once formal, today it is very much structured, very much local, and very structured in how it's delivered.
That's really interesting because definitely access is something that changes a lot of things across several industry, and I believe iGaming is definitely not an exception. But looking at the way things has been, because now we're talking about the progress, looking at the impact of technology. But what would you say has been looking at history, being based on your experience, has been the government attitude far back as 10 years to now?
Yeah, I think there's still this illusion from regulators and politicians that operators are sitting on mountains of profit. But, but in truth, like in digital betting, where we are today, especially with aggressive bonuses, with affiliate deals, taxation, and everything that goes in between, it's become a very tight margin business. So, and we see that new layers coming into play as well. Things like cryptocurrencies, we see digital wallets. So all of that comes into the fore, and it's not just for speculation; it is there for speed and for convenience. So it might not be mainstream in Africa yet in terms of crypto, but we see there's constant pressure for faster, cheaper methods to be able to deliver that entertainment.
You mentioned briefly how the government thinks the iGaming industry is sitting on a whole lot of money, and this is a gross misunderstanding. So, do you want to maybe run down the differences, like the wagering model, deposits, and how exactly taxation could be done where it will not be harmful to the organizations?
Yeah, when I said there's a solution of a pile of cash, what the governments then and politicians see is tax, the ability to tax to feed the fiscus. And in reality, what happens is gambling looks like an easy target because now you're able to tax on various elements. So whether it is on the turnover based tax, whether it is on winnings tax, the gross revenue after all of this has happened, because it feels non-essential, what actually happens is if you overtax, like was happened in Kenya, what happens is you grow an underground or black market where the punter gets more bang for his buck because of the lack of taxes. And that means that the legitimate operators shrink and you have less transparency and less control to see to responsible gaming.
That's really interesting. When you talked about looking at the Kenya market as an example, and I know you're also very experienced in the South African market, what would you say are the differences in the taxation model? Or what are because I think there was a time there was so much conversation around South Africa trying to adopt the Kenya style, and I know that got a bit of backlash. I even read something from you where you also expressed your opinion on it. Can you maybe expatiate on that a bit?
Sure. South Africa had this wonderful idea, and it was pushed from a specific party from Bosa to fill the gap that the proposed hike in VAT would have left by taxing the South African gaming operators even more. And I challenged that, and I said that probably the worst methodology to drive additional revenue because of, like I said, the risks that you have in reducing transparency, an increase in problem gaming, and a reduction in the base of the legitimate operators. It was a very short term fix that would have caused long term harm.
While you were talking, you made mention of how that could actually affect the economy rather than what they are looking to achieve, which would be like, shrink the market instead of bringing in more legitimate operators. Would you say that high taxation would actually affect the revenue for the government, or what's your opinion on it? I think that's one. Then also, from what you said, I also would like to know, because some people listening, they may not specifically understand how the finances work, especially for iGaming operators. I think that's where the misconception comes in, that a whole lot of money comes into the operators and they are just sitting on pile of cash. How do the finances work? What is wager like? You can go into details, take your time.
Yeah, and the perception exists that every deposit is cash into the bank of operators, and it's completely the opposite. Like I previously said, that there's so many things that still need to be seen to from that deposit. Remember, there is a return to the player of any of the money spent. Then there's affiliate fees, there's payment fees, there's platform fees. So a whole host of costs that makes the margins razor thin in gaming. And once you then include things like overtaxation and making it more costly to be compliant, you run the risk of de-incentivizing the legitimate operators. So I'm happy to say that there are regulators and there are regulators out there that understand that the industry that they work in and that are not trying to punish it. And they are trying to work with operators to create a sustainable model. Things like Zambia and Botswana come to mind. Um, and Uganda with the new guidelines that being workshopped with the different operators in mind. So I think some of the issues are that the regulations and legislation was was probably created many years ago and has become archaic in sense and hasn't kept up with the time. And when we modernize the world that we live in through legislation that recognizes the change that we've gone through, and just have a look at the last 10 years maybe how much has changed, I think then you're pushing operators into the right space.
You were talking about several things across other African region. You mentioned Zambia, you mentioned Uganda, and a bit of some other African spaces. Would you say how African handles taxation, finances, especially in iGaming, is a bit unique when it comes to other countries outside of Africa?
So we've got a wonderful opportunity here where if we are brave enough from the regulators' point of view, which we've seen significantly strong boards coming about, that we have the ability to move towards harmonized frameworks that will work regionally. If we have a look at SADC or the East Africa Community to set the basic standards, it will reduce so much of of that friction that currently exists. We are adopting better standards, technology-driven compliance, real-time reporting, digital KYC, because the one thing that we are in Africa is we are mobile. We are able to move across the borders, and if we keep up with our regulations, we are able to better harness what this industry can do for the punters.
Oh, that's amazing. Looking at the operator regulator collaboration, you spoke about how the clash to working together can bring so much growth in the industry rather than shrinking it. What would you say a healthy relationship between regulators and operator look like, in practice?
Yeah, I think there's a cultural shift coming into play where the regulators and the operators are not seen as opponents, but as working together in the same industry to get better education, better local campaigns, better responsible gaming tools out, better player self exclusion. So I think across both sides there's a need and want to better handle the responsibilities that we have.
Basically, a good relationship between, operators, regulators means better policy, reduced fraud, more compliance, and, just an overall growth in the industry in general. And I think earlier when you were talking about, things that has had effect on so many changes happening in the industry, I know you made a bit like a mention of crypto. And I would like to know, are crypto deposits increasing? And what does this mean for, KYC and regulators in general?
And there's definitely an uptake in a bigger uptake in the use of cryptocurrency, not only for gaming but in the general life, the day-to-day life of Africans, because it allows for mobility, and that with that mobility comes more complex legislation and regulation. And I think regulators would have and operators would need to carefully consider what they would need to do to stay compliant.
Yeah, definitely. And, blockchain has just been redefining so many things. And definitely, this is one that, I would definitely have so much impact in the iGaming, even more than it is currently. Also, looking at the iGaming industry, when you look at the changing dynamics from adversary to being collaboratory, especially across, region, industry, why do you think this is very important for the industry? That means more collaboration rather than the tussle which we constantly see happening in the industry.
Yeah, so there's a shift that treating betting as a hustle or a windfall to seeing it as a form of entertainment and with very specific rules. So that starts with education. It means that operators are funding local campaigns, pushing responsible gaming proactively, and just not hiding behind terms in fine print anymore. So a stronger move towards player exclusion, more than just a tick box. So everything verifiable across the platform, and then supported by things like counseling and helplines. So that licensee understanding that they're investing in the social fabric too. I think that we've seen a strong move towards.
Talking about collaboration in particular and looking to, things that I think is a bit more enviable in others and working on it or adopting it. Looking at the framework South Africa has in particular, what would you say the rest of the continent can learn from South Africa in terms of designing best regulatory practices?
I think we can learn all learn from one another. I don't think there's a perfect system yet. But what has worked is a system where it is structured, where there is follow through, where there is consequences. I think that's the most important bit, where we see when there's regulations and rules for it to be followed and consequences for not doing so. When there are responsibilities like taxation for it to be seen to. and that means that you have a more structured and more efficient system.
I know all through our conversation, we've spoken a lot around, operators, regulators. We've barely talked much about players in general. But, when it comes to players, we're talking a lot about transparency, players like, a bit of transparency. And, when we are considering monitoring transparency and protection, which is something that is very particular to players. So protection on both operators and players angle. How do you think we can achieve this through technology? Because I think that's one of the major aspects where there's several conversation going on in the industry also.
And the beautiful thing about the digital space is that we have the ability to identify and see specific patterns where we see it could be problematic. We can quickly act on it and ensure that we have the support systems in place to assist players.
Also, now that we're still talking a bit more about players, I think, the iGaming industry in particular has this misconception, and even some people don't even see it as a typical industry. And in line with that, how do you think operators can take more responsibility around responsible gaming, especially missions like, player self exclusion and things like that? How do you think operators can take responsible gaming more seriously?
When it comes to player protections, things like self exclusion and responsible gaming tools. In the digital space, we have the ability to spot problematic areas much sooner than we would have had in offline. So, a, a definite look at the data, making sure that you understand and identify those issues early enough, and have the platform and tools in place to allow an exit for those players who have an issue, who might be on the verge of having an issue, and then having the support mechanisms like counseling and helplines, like I said earlier, when it's needed. And that obviously is supported by the boards and the regulators to ensure that these are well funded and part of the license in itself.
So, do you see cultural change and citizens being more involved generally as a way to achieving more industry growth and maturity?
So definitely there's been a change in the player in the last few years from being a taker of what's being provided to having a meaningful impact on what product is requested and required from operators. We see that in the type of games that people play. We see that in the style of games that they play and how they do it, not only by themselves or just as a single player, but how they do that as a group, as a society, as a social circle. We see that often.
Mhm. That's really interesting because at the end of the day, from players to operators, there has to be a whole lot of involvement and collaboration for the industry to really get to where it needs to be. And more side also on impact of the regulators themselves. So, if you are to talk about advice for regulators, operators on how to make the industry mature, profitable, and stable, something that speaks to everyone, what would it be?
If I had a wish, it would have been in 3 to 5 years. We see fair and dynamic taxes. We see collaborative policy making. We we see investment in people and not just platforms. And above all, patience, because this is a long game. So making sure that we grow in a way that allows space for every actor in this to come to the fore.
That sounds really good. And you made mention of your vision. What would you say is your vision for the iGaming industry in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we're at a place where it will either make it or break it in different aspects of it. It is either going to be accepted or shunned if we don't make some necessary changes uh, with game types and the way that people are being exposed to games early on. But if we get it right, I think Africa won't be just the next big market. We'll be the benchmark for other territories on how to be an inclusive, sustainable iGaming operation worldwide.
Well, that's definitely a big vision. I really hope, in 5 to 10 years, when we look back, we'll definitely be there or even, way past that. Putting aside, now the operators, regulators, taxes, and finance, I know there are people listening to this who want to do what you do. They've seen your experience, you've been around long enough. I don't know, for talents coming up, or even people looking to study career fresh, what would you be your advice to them? What are the tools they should look at? How can they get started?
And it's going to be start at the bottom, start to learn anything that you can in the method that you can. So, in the space that you're in. And I think whether it is being a call center agent, learning how to deal with clients, understanding what the client would want, then moving on to understanding the product. As you go through your months and years of experience, every day is a learning day. There is never a day that I don't walk out of the office thinking that I have not learned anything. Every day is a learning day, and every day something else changes, so nothing stays the same.
That's definitely something to hold on to. Basically, every day is a learning day, and it's a fast industry. Things are constantly changing. So you have to adapt, you have to move. And what would you say the perception is like, in terms of working, and what are the opportunities like?
I know for a fact that we've always been at the forefront of technology, of martech. It's born out of betting. So I'm excited to see how we take the next generation forward, how we move with technology. And I can tell you that the rate of change that I've seen is super exciting, because everything that we know now today would have probably changed in 3 years.
Thank you so much today. You shared a lot across boards, from regulators to operators, almost something that's touched several aspects of your knowledge. You've been around for 25 years in a fast industry like this. Thank you so much for sharing. Do you have any final thoughts before we end today's conversation?
Yeah, sure. I have the one thing that I've learned is that this gaming industry is a puzzle, and a puzzle that require all the different pieces to fit together in order to make a beautiful picture. So every single part needs to be in place and needs to fit. There is no squeezing one corner.
So thank you so much for sharing insight and experience. This has been one of the most practical conversation I've had, especially around taxation across board from Africa, covering other aspects in general. So thank you so much for sharing and for honoring our invite. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you found this helpful, make sure you share it, tag, and is there any way they can reach you or connect with you that you would like to share?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So always available on LinkedIn.
So Cameron is always available on LinkedIn, and you already know where you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other the streaming platform in general. Until the next time, we remain iGaming Africa podcast. See you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.